And why don't the blood vessels in your lungs have
Yeah.
atherosclerosis?
And why not just all along the artery walls?
And why not all along the artery wall? If it's absorbing through, why is it only absorbing through in certain points? So you get a plaque. Some people die because of one atherosclerotic plaque in one artery in their heart. They have everything else is clear. One plaque. Right? You say, well, surely that's a problem of that bit of the artery. That can't be a sort of global problem with cholesterol. And of course, if you take a vein from the leg and stick it into the heart and use it as a coronary artery bypass, it very rapidly furs up with atherosclerosis. So there's veins can develop atherosclerosis, and a vein in a person that has no atherosclerosis can be taken from their leg and put into their heart, whereupon it develops atherosclerosis. So you say, well, there's clearly something about it being in the heart that is doing this. And what is that? What is happening here that is not happening there? What's going on? So when you say to cardiologists, why don't you get atherosclerosis in veins? They don't answer this question. They just say, oh, it's bad. And you think when someone doesn't have an answer to a question, that you think, I'm going to look at this really, really closely. And I'm going to ask myself, well, why? And then you look at, there are conditions that children have, well, adults have them, but they tend to sort them out, whereby you have shunts in your heart, where there's a fairly large gap in your heart, and the blood pressure from the left side of your heart shoots into the right side of your heart, then goes into your lungs, and then increases the blood pressure in your lungs, called pulmonary hypertension. And if you have this condition, you end up with atherosclerosis in your lungs. So you think, well, what is the difference between somebody who's got this, called Eisenmenger's syndrome? What's the difference between this and not this? Is the level of blood pressure, clearly. What you call the biomechanical stress, or whatever term you want to use. So something's happening to the blood vessel, and that something is clearly the thing that triggers the process, or allows the process to happen. A bit like with a gun, you can't fire it until the safety catch is off. So someone's removed the safety catch if you take a vein and put it in the heart, and someone's removed the safety catch if you got a hole in your heart that allows the blood pressure to go to high pressure in your lungs. And then you can find other things. You look back in history and you say, well, other people have thought this. This is not just me. The first ideas around this started in 1852. So that's 170 years ago. So I didn't wake up one day with a fully formed hypothesis about all this stuff. There's a guy called Karl von Rokitansky who was in Vienna in 1852. But then you start looking and you say, well, actually, a lot of people have had these same ideas over the years. It's just that it's never, ever reached with critical mass, or whatever term you want to use. So after the Second World War, there were quite a lot of people who were saying, well, we're looking at in the lungs, actually, mainly of people, and saying, well, what we can see, and in other blood vessels, what we see is you see what they call a thrombus, or a blood clot, blocking a blood vessel. And it can fully block a blood vessel, and you think that's pretty disastrous. And then what happens is little pipes of blood vessels start to form and go all the way through this thrombus, and then gradually they form together and become a new tube through which the blood can flow. And then around this you have like a sort of wedding, or some people call it a wedding ring of blockage, a thinning area, so that certain areas have been, if you like, blocked and then hollowed out. And these, as you said, you can see these becoming what we call atherosclerosis. Over time, they turn from a blood clot into atherosclerosis. And it was a really interesting research paper from 1955. Unfortunately, if you want to look at research papers from 1955, normally you have to pay about $500 to get access to them. It's ridiculous. The money situation. Anyway, so I was looking at this paper.
I won't get you started.
No, they got me started. And what they'd realized, there'd been research where they got animals and they'd injected blood clots into their veins, and then they'd gone up their vein into their heart, gone through their heart, right side of the heart, and into their lungs, where obviously it gets stuck as the blood vessels get smaller and smaller. And what they found is if you kept injecting blood clots into animal veins in their lungs, they developed atherosclerosis. What was called atherosclerosis. It started off with blood clots. The blood clots gradually transformed, and they turned into plaques, atherosclerotic plaques, which is the underlying heart disease thing. And so they said, well, does this happen in children? And in 1955, they didn't have heart-lung transplant machines. There were children who had heart problems and valve problems that they couldn't operate on, but they were firing blood clots into their lungs on a regular basis. And what they saw is that these blood clots were coming off the heart, getting into the lungs, blocking in the lungs, and turning into atherosclerotic plaques, or what you would say is an atherosclerotic plaque.